The topic we'll be discussing today is birth asphyxia. As the name indicates, there is a lack of oxygen due to the failure to establish breathing in 1 minute. Normally, when a child is delivered, the child gasps for about 6 seconds, or some literature say for about 20 seconds, and then spontaneous respiration is usually established. For instance, if the child is not able to establish spontaneous respiration in 1 minute, there will be low oxygen levels in the body and the tissues. So we have got two criteria. We have the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we have the criteria of the American College of Gynecologists and Obstetrician. But we will be discussing the AAP criteria over here, which says that asphyxia is basically a triad of umbilical artery pH of less than 7, means there's acidosis developing. The second point is that the 5-minute Apgar score is less than or equal to 3. This Apgar score will later be discussed, and there is evidence of multi-organ dysfunction. Normally, the low levels of oxygen will be contributing to different issues developing in different systems of the body, as all the systems of the body, whether the CNS, the GI tract, they're all dependent on oxygen for them to function properly. So in CNS, you can expect hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy developing. Kidneys might develop acute tubular necrosis as a result of low supply of oxygen. In GIT, you can expect gastric ulcerations to develop. Liver, for instance, you might have LFTs that are elevated, or in heart, you can actually have myocardial ischemia and cardiac failure developing later on. So the pathophysiology behind this process is, we all know when there's low levels of oxygen, the blood supply and the oxygen is basically diverted to the essential organs of the body, that is your heart, your lungs, your brain. So what happens with the compromise of blood flow to the skeletal muscles and the GI tract? So fetal hypoxia will be causing a diversion of blood flow to the heart, brain and the adrenals. And there'll come a time when with the depletion of the oxygen storage, they will be switching from aerobic to anaerobic metabolism due to the lack of oxygen. And as we all know, when the glucose is anaerobically metabolized, it's converted to pyruvate and then to lactate, which is basically an acid. And that acid will be accumulating inside the tissues in the body, resulting in a condition that is known as metabolic acidosis. One more thing, with anaerobic metabolism, you have low supplies of ATP as compared to that produced during anaerobic metabolism. So what happens in the CNS, the low ATP levels will cause a failure of the pump. Nearly every tissue of the body is basically supplied with a pump, which pumps 3 sodium outside and 2 potassium inside of the cell at the expense of ATP. And that if the pump is not functioning properly due to the low levels of ATP, we will be having influx of sodium and loss of potassium, and that retention of sodium inside the cell will result in water retention and ultimately cellular swelling and neuronal swelling. When the pump is not functioning properly, there will be retention of sodium resulting in membrane depolarization with the release of glutamate and aspartate, and both of these are basically excitotoxic neurotransmitters. When these neurotransmitters are released from the cell, it's going to activate the NMD receptors, which are the receptors for glutamate, and that will further augment the neuronal damage. Acidosis, as was discussed previously, that lack of oxygen result in accumulation of lactic acid and ultimately acidosis developing. This will result in failure of autoregulation. So autoregulation is basically a phenomena in which the blood supply to a particular organ is maintained by different mechanisms that could be myogenic, etc. So we have got, when there is acidosis developing, we have the dysregulation of autoregulation with further impairment of perfusion, and then when the supply is not maintained properly, there will be accumulation of lactic acidosis and ultimately the worsening of acidosis and acidemia in the body. Always remember the 4 A's while managing a birth asphyxia. What are these 4 A's? We have got anticipation, that is assess the risk factors either during the maternal visits or at the time of delivery. Assessment by proper Apgar scoring of the child. Action means the resuscitative measures should be taken accordingly, and aftercare of the child if the child has been resuscitated. So the risk factors should be determined or during the maternal visits or during the delivery of the baby or during the labor process in order to alert the proper team so that they are ready with the proper resuscitative equipment or not. There are certain conditions in which in which the risk factors are absent, but still a child is born with asphyxia. So it's essential that every hospital should be equipped with such a team who is ready to deal with asphyxia always. So we have got certain maternal, placental, and fetal risk factors that can be determined before the delivery. So, for instance, if the mother has got hypertension, diabetes, cardiac or respiratory disease, you can expect low supply of oxygen or blood supply to the fetus. Infections, for instance, if the mother has got chorioamnionitis, again this is associated with fetal distress. Hypotension, again this delivers less amount of oxygen to the less amount of blood flow to the placenta. CPD, it's cephalopelvic disproportion. This causes prolonged labor, and again, prolonged labor is associated with fetal distress. For instance, you have got placental insufficiency. The reason might be hypertension or elsewhere, eclampsia, something of that sort. So, placental insufficiency again contributes to low supply of blood flow to the fetus. Placenta abruptio, again low supply of blood delivered to the fetus. Fetal risk factors, multiple gestations. For instance, if we have twin pregnancies or triplets, this is associated with prematurity. This is associated with growth failure. IUGR, again, IUGR is basically a condition in which the child was not thriving properly inside the womb, and again this is associated with problems developing later on. Cord prolapse, infections, torch infections maybe. So these risk factors should be anticipated beforehand, and accordingly proper teams should be on standby to deal with any complication that develops later on. Assessment. So we have got this score, the APGAR score, which basically aids in the assessment of the newborn. This score will quantitatively estimate asphyxia, but remember, it does not diagnose asphyxia. It helps you in identifying a child with asphyxia, but this does not give you a diagnosis of asphyxia. So one thing that is it's got a drawback is basically it's got a false positive 15%. Maybe the child was normal, but it gave you a wrong prediction, and that is the false positivity rate of 15%. False negative in 9%. So this is one of the drawbacks of APGAR score. So APGAR score has basically got 5 components. So this is basically the color, A for appearance, P for pulse, G for grimace, that is it's basically a response to the nasal catheter. Next, again, A for activity, and R for respiratory rate. So for instance, if the child has got absent or irregular respiration, we will be awarding this child 0 score. And if the child's color again is pillar or central cyanosis, we will be awarding the child a 0 score. So the maximum score a child can get is basically a 10, and the minimum score is obviously a 0. So on the basis of these components present, you will be awarding the child different score. It could either be a 0, it could be 1, or it could be 2. You'll be assessing the respiratory rate, heart rate, color, tone, and the response to a nasal catheter. And whatever component you get, you will be awarding the child that particular score accordingly. APGAR score interpretation. So APGAR score is basically assessed at 1, 5, and then it's basically assessed at 10 minutes. So APGAR at 1 minute, it indicates the need for resuscitation. For instance, if you have a child whose APGAR score is above 7 or 7, then it's considered reassuring. But still, you need to re-perform the APGAR score at 5 and 10 minutes. For instance, if the APGAR score is 4 to 6, it's considered moderately abnormal, and you need to keep an eye on that child. Maybe the child might require resuscitation later on. An APGAR of 3 or less is considered as critically low, and it requires intensive resuscitation. APGAR at 1, as already talked about, it indicates the need for resuscitation. As well as if we do the APGAR at 5, it indicates the success of resuscitation. For instance, there was a child whose APGAR score was 3, and you resuscitated the child, and the APGAR score at 5 minutes had improved to about 6 maybe. So this indicates that basically your resuscitative measures are working, and there is there's some sort of success of resuscitation. Apart from that, for instance, if there was a child whose APGAR score again was 2 at birth, and after giving intensive resuscitation to that child, APGAR score at 5 minutes was 3. This predicts that this child is at a risk of developing some sort of neurodevelopmental delay, because hypoxia that persists for about 5 minutes will result in neuronal damage, and ultimately as a result of that neuronal damage, you can expect some sort of neurodevelopmental disability resulting in that child. So APGAR at 5 and 10, it predicts the neurodevelopmental outcome, and also it determines the success of resuscitation, whether the resuscitative measures you have taken during that 1 minute, they were successful or not, they're working or not. So we have got two conditions over here. We have got Asphyxia livida and Asphyxia pallida. So on that basis of APGAR score, you can say we land up with these two situations we can have. So Asphyxia livida is basically a condition. For instance, if the child has heart rate of more than 100, the child has got good tone, but the child has got generalized cyanosis with apnea or gasping. So the APGAR score will be lying between 4 and 7, and this is Asphyxia livida. In case of Asphyxia pallida, we have got generalized pallor, means generalized cyanosis. Heart rate is also less than 100, and the child has got poor activity, poor tone, and the child does not respond to the nasal stimulation. So the APGAR score over here lies between 1 and 3, and this child requires immediate resuscitation. Majority of these children usually are in a state of terminal apnea, and this usually indicates prolonged hypoxia or ischemia to that child. And this again obviously will be requiring intensive resuscitations and probably cardiorespiratory support as well. So we have got different assessment techniques. We'll be having different algorithms in order to assess a child, but this is the one that I find very easy. So whenever a child, so first of all, whenever the child is delivered and the child is handed to a nurse who is ready with a warm sterile cloth, and that nurse will be obviously cleaning the child, and we'll be placing it under radiant heat, and probably will be suctioning the trachea in case of meconium aspiration, or initially, in order to remove the secretions present inside or present in the oral cavity, will initially be suctioning the mouth and then the nose. So the initial steps that needs to be done are that is place a child under radiant heat in order to warm the child, and suction the trachea if it's meconium stained. Dry thoroughly in order to prevent hypothermia developing in that child. Remove the wet linen, remove the wet clothing, and just cover the child with some dry clothes. Position the child. The child should be positioned in such a way that the neck is a bit extended and the airway is clear. Suction the mouth first and then nose. And don't over suction the child, as it can result in reflex bradycardia, because when you are suctioning excessively, it will result in the activation of vagus nerve, and the vagus will result in increased parasympathetic supply, and that parasympathetic supply will be resulting in low heart rate, and that is known as reflex bradycardia. So don't over suction the child. Provide tactile stimulations. Do not slap the child, just flick the sole of the child, so that you are providing the stimulation to the child. Next thing that needs to be done is respiration. So this is second step, ABC. This is the breathing of the ABC protocol. When you did the position and all the thing, you are actually clearing the airway, and when you evaluate the respirations, you are actually dealing with the breathing. So respirations, either you can have spontaneous respirations, or you can actually have none or gasping type of respirations. So we'll move with this first. When we have spontaneous respirations, the next step that needs to be done is the C, that is circulation. So you evaluate the heart rate. If the heart rate is above 100, and then you evaluate the color. If the child is blue, just provide oxygen to a child. So the oxygen is provided to a child provided that the color is blue and the heart rate is above 100 and the respirations are normal. So then only oxygen is provided. For instance, the color was basically pink or peripheral cyanosis. Peripheral cyanosis is also known as acrocyanosis, in which the extremities are pink, in the extremities are blue, and that can either be due to the cold temperatures the child is in. So this is not to be worried about. So if the child was pink or peripheral cyanosis, just observe and monitor. For instance, when you were dealing with this condition, the heart rate was above 100, and if the heart rate, for instance, it was below 100, and the respiration was also none or gasping, so you need to provide positive pressure ventilation with 100% oxygen for 15 to 30 seconds, and then after 15 to 30 seconds you will be evaluating the heart rate. If the heart rate after giving PPV with 100% oxygen for 15 to 30 seconds is below 60, then you will continue the ventilation with positive pressure ventilation. You will start with the chest compressions at a rate of 90 per minute. For instance, if then you have a child whose heart rate is basically between 60 to 100, so then you will continue the ventilations and start the chest compressions if the heart rate falls below 80. If after giving the positive pressure ventilations, if the heart rate has come out to be above 100, you watch for spontaneous respiration. If the respiration has returned, then you discontinue the ventilation. In this scenario, in which the heart rate was basically below 60, or when you have started the chest compressions, if you are doing the chest compressions and if the heart rate is still below 80 after 30 seconds, PPV with 100% oxygen and chest compressions. Then you start the medications, which will be discussed later on. So you start the medications when the heart rate is basically below 80 after 30 seconds of providing the child with 100% oxygen and chest compressions. Then the medications are started. So for instance, if I have a child whose respiration, when I evaluate the respiration is basically gasping. So the next step I'll be doing is I'll be providing the child with PPV with 100% oxygen, and then after 15 to 30 seconds I'll be reassessing the child, and then I'll be reevaluating the heart rate. And for instance, if the child's heart rate come out to be above 100, then I'll be watching for spontaneous respiration. So this chart needs to be learned properly in order to, so that you are able to deal with the child and properly do the resuscitation of that child. The drugs that are given, as we talked about, the drugs were given when you did the chest compressions for 15 to 30 seconds and you were providing PPV with 100% oxygen and still the heart rate was basically below 80. Then you were providing the drugs. So we have got epinephrine. So it's given, as we all know, epinephrine has got a positive inotropic, positive chronotropic effect, and it's basically given at a rate of 0.1 to 0.3 ml per kg or via the endotracheal intubation. So the indication is basically it's given when the heart rate is 0 or the heart rate is below 80 despite 100% oxygen and chest compression. This was already discussed. So you need to either give it IV or via the ETT tube. Next thing is basically sodium bicarbonate. Sodium bicarbonate is usually given if there is metabolic acidosis present. The volume expanders, as we know, it's going to expand the volume. So we have got different volume expanders. You can either give in normal saline, Ringer's, fresh frozen plasma, or whole blood, or Hemaxil. So it's given when there's evidence of circulatory collapse. And what are the signs and symptoms of circulatory collapse the child might have? Who clammy peripheries, a thready pulse with a good heart rate, but there's a thready pulse. And so these are the signs and symptoms of circulatory collapse, and then you can give the child volume expanders. The dopamine is given when after giving epinephrine, sodium bicarbonate, volume expanders, that is prolonged resuscitation, they have all failed to improve the circulatory outcome. That is, the BP is still low and there are still cool clammy peripheries and the pulse is still thready. So then you will be giving a dopamine infusion, and it's you can actually combine dopamine with dobutamine in resistant cases. So this has shown to improve outcome. Remember, this resuscitation should be continued for about 30 minutes before you decide whether you need to continue on with that or not. And after 30 minutes, if there's been no improvement or success in resuscitative measures, then you need to decide whether you need to continue this on or not, because after 30 minutes, there is a higher chance that the child will be having some sort of neurodevelopmental deficits later on in life. But the important thing that should be considered is the resuscitative measures should be continued for at least 30 minutes. Aftercare is very important. Any child who has been resuscitated should be observed for at least 24 hours to look for any organ dysfunction. As talked about earlier, the resuscitation is associated with organ dysfunction as well. So you need to assess the child for 24 hours to see that the child has not developed any organ dysfunction. So we'll be monitoring the vital signs, the BP, heart rate, respiratory rate, and look out for organ dysfunction. For instance, monitor the urine output. For instance, a child might have suffered some sort of injury to your kidneys, so monitor the urine output. Development of seizures, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, for instance, it might have developed hepatic dysfunction. Avoid fluid overload, means that is you just give two-thirds of the normal requirement of that child. Prevent hypoglycemia and hypothermia, and if they do develop, just treat them promptly. If the seizures develop, you need to give phenobarbital IV. Don't give diazepam, because diazepam again is associated with respiratory depression. If any complication develops, for instance, as talked about earlier, any complication related to a particular system, then you need to refer to appropriate facility for management. So this concludes our discussion of asphyxia.